I don't think I want the stream URL though. I just want to see it. All right, going to the tube channel. Bingo. Mike Tess, can you hear me? I hear it. Unlocked. Okay. This keyboard doesn't actually let me do what I needed to do. That sucks. Well, greatness. It's only an attempt. So, anyways, y'all just gotta hang out with me. I'm trying to find a script. Maddie, can you do me a favor? Can you get my iPad testing? I said, can you get my iPad? So, anyways, y'all just gotta hang out with me. I'm trying to find the script. Maddie, can you do me a favor? Thank you for that. I hope it's in here. I hope it is in here. All I'm looking for is study guide. It looks like the study guide is not in here. I'm looking for the script for it, but I don't know which phone I put it on. If y'all know me, I have too many devices. And I've learned not to sync them all together so I can have some storage. But if y'all just hang tight, we are gonna get into some studying. I just yeah, I'm taking my time to make sure everything is together, you know. Um it looks like the YouTube is good. I don't have to watch that. All right. YouTube, there's a open chest counts. I don't think y'all can see my nipples because I can't see my nipples, but I don't think it should count. But anyways, let's appreciate that. No, you're fine. Let's find the study guide. Yes, ma'am. Not this one. Now, here's the kicker. I think I put it in my daily routines and stuff. So hopefully it's in there. If it's not, we're in some trouble. But if it is, it works out in our favor. Study guide. Okay. I have some Coursera stuff in here. Y'all don't understand. Get what it is, you know what it is. Welcome to the study guide. I'm here to break down today's class notes and help us learn together. No, it is emailed to me. Uh-oh. I did email it to myself. Give me a second. Um, that's kind of tough because I don't think after we emailed it, we actually took notes for it. But let's keep digging. Maybe I'm just checking the wrong phone. I see the study guide there. Okay. Did you ever edit the real one? Man, this is terrible. All right. You would have sent it to your Outlook. Yes. That's not it. You know, so crazy. You went to the wrong email. You can literally just open up Gmail without signing in, bro. That sucks that you're signed out. Did it end it? It did not. It's just sitting there. Hold up, y'all. I'm trying to get my script together. Just stay tight. All right, y'all. I did add a lot to this script. I am eventually gonna have to cut this down, but we have yo what it is. You know what it is. Welcome to the study guide. I'm here to study for the CLEPT Western Civilization 1 exam. I'm taking this exam because I want to earn some college credits and save time and knock out a full course using the CLEP system instead of a full semester. For today's session, I'll be using the REA Prep Book and the Modern States course, which are two of the most recommended resources for CLEP prep. We'll be going over Western Civilization 1, and we'll be focusing on the definitely not that. My apologies. I don't know why I'm in that chapter. We're supposed to be talking about ancient. There we go. The ancient Near East, which is pretty much chapter two. But in the modern states, it says prehistory and early civilization. So it's all of that stuff. Um, where we at next? Uh, modern states. We'll be going over that. So if you're studying for the same exam and you want a productive study session, go grab your materials or follow along with me right here. That means this. um, hold up. Okay, cool. I can point this way. That's fine. Right here, and we'll go ahead and study together. Let's get started. Oop-de-doo. I wonder if it gives me like a little preview. Give me 1 second, y'all. Let me see. They should have a way that I can just read this out loud. There it is. Everybody say who?
Content loaded. 1. Prehistory and early civilizations. 1. Prehistory and early civilizations. Content loaded. 1. Prehistory and early civil.
Yeah, I might have to refresh the page a little bit. I don't know why it's not actually like reading the full page. Usually it does
Content
that.
loaded. 1. Prehistory and early civilizations. 1. Prehistory and early civilizations.
I did not expect this to do this, so give me uno momento. Mm. Oh, it says continue read out loud from here. I got it. I have a little system glitch. So what I'll do is probably restart this after I see what's going on. But let's go ahead and just jump into the book, um, the CLEP Western Civilization 1 study material. So we're start here.
Chapter 1.
Nope, not we're not starting at chapter 1. I'm sorry. We're starting at chapter 2. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's just gonna tell us. I mean, if y'all really care, I can tell y'all how like studying is gonna go. So if y'all want to jump into chapter 1, let's go ahead and do it. So y'all can get a little understanding of what we're
REA, the
studying.
leader in CLEP test prep CLEP * Western Civilization I. Robert Ziemkowski, Cornell University, PhD. Research and Education Association. Visit our website at www.rea.com/study center. Research and Education Association. 61 Ethel Road West, Piscataway, New Jersey 08854. Email info@rea.com. CLEP Western Civilization I.
We're gonna go ahead and skip past some of this copyright stuff. It's not important, so let's skip past
Cover image.
Bye bye.
REA is a registered trademark of research. CLEP * Western Civilization I. Access your online exams by following the instructions found at the back of this book. Contents. About our
Let's get past the table of contents and let's get to chapter 1.
glossary. In acknowledgement. Civilization I exam.
There we go.
Chapter 1. Passing the CLEP Western Civilization I exam. Congratulations! You're joining the millions of people who have discovered the value and educational advantage offered by the College Board's College Level Examination Program, or CLEP. This test prep covers everything you need to know about the CLEP Western Civilization I exam and will help you earn the college credit you deserve while reducing your tuition costs. Getting started. There are many different ways to prepare for a CLEP exam. What's best for you depends on how much time you have to study and how comfortable you are with the subject matter. To score your highest, you need a system that can be customized to fit you, your schedule, your learning style, and your current level of knowledge. This book and the online tools that come with it allow you to create a personalized study plan through 3 simple steps: assessment of your knowledge, targeted review of exam content, and reinforcement in the areas where you need the most help. Let's get started and see how this system works. Test yourself and get feedback. Review with the book. Improve your score. Score reports from your online diagnostic and practice tests give you a fast way to pinpoint what you already know and where you need to spend more time studying. Study the topics tested on the CLEP exam. Targeted review chapters cover everything you need to know. Armed with your score reports, you can personalize your study plan. Review the parts of the book where you're weakest and study the answer explanations for the test questions you answered incorrectly. The REA Study Center. The best way to personalize your study plan and focus on your weaknesses is to get feedback on what you know and what you don't know. At the online REA Study Center, you can access 2 types of assessment: a diagnostic exam and full-length practice exams. Each of these tools provides true-to-format questions and delivers a detailed score report that follows the topics set by the College Board. Diagnostic exam. Before you begin your review with the book, take the online diagnostic exam. Use your score report to help evaluate your overall understanding of the subject, so you can focus your study on the topics where you need the most review. Full-length practice exams. These practice tests give you the most complete picture of your strengths and weaknesses. After you've finished reviewing with the book, test what you've learned by taking the first of the 2 online practice exams. Review your score report, then go back and study any topics you missed. Take the second practice test to ensure you have mastered the material and are ready for test day. If you're studying and don't have internet access, you can take the printed tests in the book. These are the same practice tests offered at the REA Study Center, but without the added benefits of time testing conditions and diagnostic score reports. Because the actual exam is computer-based, we recommend you take at least one practice test online to simulate test day conditions. An overview of the exam. The CLEP Western Civilization I exam consists of 120 multiple choice questions, each with 5 possible answer choices, to be answered in 90.
120 multiple choice questions. I have to answer 120 multiple choice questions. That's fine. That's fine. Um, I'm glad to know that this is the breakdown though. So as we start studying, we gotta highlight these topics the most. Ancient Near East, ancient Greece, Hellenistic civilization. We're not gonna talk about that. Not political right now, or yeah, we're gonna skip past that. And you have ancient Rome, medieval history, Renaissance and Reformation, and then early modern Europe, 1560 to 1648. So this is gonna be interesting. I'm really looking forward to it.
90 minutes. The exam covers the material one would find in the first semester of a 2-semester course in Western civilization. The exam questions deal with the civilizations of ancient Greece, Rome, and the Near East, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance and the Reformation, and early modern Europe. The approximate breakdown of topics is as follows. 8 to 10% ancient Near East, 15 to 17% ancient Greece and Hellenistic civilization, 15 to 17% ancient Rome, 23 to 27% medieval history, 13 to 17% Renaissance and Reformation, 10 to 15% early modern Europe, 15 60 to 1648. All about the CLEP program. What is the CLEP? CLEP is the most widely accepted credit by examination program in North America. CLEP exams are available in 33 subjects and test the material commonly required in an introductory level college course. Examinees can earn from 3 to 12 credits at more.
I'm not gonna lie. If y'all want to read that, get the book. This is just letting you know the benefits of taking CLEP exams. We're just gonna go ahead and move past that. Um, so yeah, they have a 6-week study plan. Hopefully, I can start here.
More than 2,900 colleges.
I definitely highlighted where I wanted to start. So
6-week study plan. Although our study plan is designed to be used in the 6 weeks before your exam, it can be condensed to 3 weeks by combining each 2-week period into one. Be sure to set aside enough time, at least 2 hours each day, to study. The more time you spend studying, the more prepared and relaxed you will feel on the day of the exam. Week Activity 1. Take the diagnostic exam. The score report will identify topics where you need the most review. 2 to 4. 5. 6. Study the review chapters. Use your diagnostic score report to focus your study. Take practice test 1 at the REA Study Center. Review your score report and restudy any topics you missed. Take practice test 2 at the REA Study Center to see how much your score has improved. If you still got a few questions wrong, go back to the review and study any topics you may have missed. Test taking tips. Know the format of the test. CLEP computer-based tests are fixed-length tests. This makes them similar to the paper and pencil type of exam because you have the flexibility to go back and review your work in each section. Learn the test structure, the time allotted for each section of the test, and the directions for each section. By learning this, you will know what Princeton, New Jersey, 0.
all right, y'all. This is more studying tips we'll look at later on. Um, but let's go ahead and dive into chapter two.
Chapter 2. The Ancient Near East. Chapter 2. The Ancient Near East. Western and Near Eastern civilizations. Western civilization arose in southeastern Europe. Its earliest representatives were the ancient Greeks. Civilization itself first appeared in the ancient Near East, in a region known as the Fertile Crescent. The cultures that flourished there exerted important influences on the rise and later course of Western civilization. The Fertile Crescent. Valleys and cities. The Fertile Crescent is an area of river valleys in the generally arid Near East where rainfall and drainage is sufficient to ensure the growth of crops. It stretches in a semicircular band from the Tigris-Euphrates Valley in modern Iraq, northwest into Syria, then south along the shore of the Mediterranean Sea toward.
So it's called the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent is the area of the river valley in the general arid Near East where rainfall. Cool.
Toward the Nile River Valley in Egypt. Egypt. The Fertile Crescent. Valleys and cities. The Fertile Crescent is an area of river valleys in the generally arid Near East where rainfall and drainage is sufficient to ensure the growth of crops. It stretches in a semicircular band from the Tigris-Euphrates Valley in modern Iraq, northwest into Syria, then south along the shore of the Mediterranean Sea toward the Nile River Valley in Egypt. Civilizations also appeared to the east somewhat later, in the Indus River Valley in India and the Yellow River Valley in China. The favorable. Chapter 2. Chapter Civilization. Western valleys. Conditions for agriculture afforded by these river valleys encouraged population growth and enabled the people living in them to devote some of their time to pursuits other than raising food. These people became better organized than their contemporaries who lived in other parts of the world, and they began to congregate in cities, which were in essence spaces to facilitate economic interactions. With the appearance of cities, civilization was born. The word civilization is related to the Latin word civitas, which means city or community. Since the inhabitants of a city do not produce their own food but are engaged in specialized trades, cities cannot support themselves and thus exist only where agriculture is successful enough to produce a surplus, which the urban population purchases. Thus, cities first arose only where especially favorable conditions existed for raising food, and these conditions were first attained in river valleys at a time when the culture of human beings had risen to a certain level of sophistication. The Old Stone Age. Cities could not have arisen without certain preceding innovations. During the earliest phase of technological progress, known as the Paleolithic Age or Old Stone Age, human beings lived as nomads in small communities, hunting and gathering fruits for their sustenance, and using fire and crude implements fashioned principally from stone and wood to assist in the struggle for survival. The most advanced tool of the time was the bow and arrow, which may have been in use by 25,000 BC. The New Stone Age. Around 8000 BC, after the most recent retreat of the glaciers that covered large portions of Europe and North America, there occurred a cultural revolution that inaugurated the Neolithic Age, or New Stone Age, during which stone tools were refined, animals were domesticated, and agriculture was developed. Many human beings abandoned nomadism in favor of a settled way of life, as necessary for the practice of farming, and organized themselves in small villages. Agriculture aided greatly in the struggle against the ever present threat of starvation, but it required a vast commitment of labor. Until very recent times, when advances in science and technology led to labor saving breakthroughs in agricultural techniques, the vast majority of human beings had to be engaged in agriculture, and the surpluses produced were relatively meager, so that only a small percentage of the population could live in cities. The Bronze Age. By the time human beings began to live in cities, they had discovered how to work metals. Tools were generally no longer made from stone but from an alloy of copper and tin, known as bronze. It should be noted that Bronze Age is, chronologically speaking, a relative term that differs from one culture to another, since different cultures transitioned from the use of stone to bronze implements at different times. In the Fertile Crescent, the Bronze Age began with the appearance of cities around 3000 BC. Irrigation. In addition to cities and metalworking, two key features of civilization in the Fertile Crescent were irrigation and writing. It was the discovery of irrigation that gave people living in the river valleys an advantage over people who practiced farming in the highlands. Without irrigation, a period of drought could lead to famine. Irrigation, in contrast, offered protection against drought, since water could be diverted from the river into fields nearby and ensured a higher yield of crops since variations in rainfall had less of an effect on growth. Since surpluses were greater and were generally maintained at a more constant level, agriculture in river valleys made cities viable in the long term. Writing. As noted above, cities were essentially places that facilitated the exchange of goods and were, therefore, primarily an economic development. In order to keep track of business transactions, people needed a method of keeping records. Writing developed to meet this need. Thus, although it was eventually put to many uses, its most prevalent early use was economic. Writing was also used by rulers to keep records, so cities became centers of political administration as well as economic focal points. History and prehistory. History itself begins with writing, which preserves details about a given culture at a certain moment in time with a fairly high degree of accuracy. All events prior to the advent of writing in a given culture are prehistoric and can only be inferred on the basis of archaeological evidence and legends, which were initially passed down by oral tradition and only later preserved in writing. Thus, events during the Stone Ages are mostly hypothetical and imprecise, but events from the Bronze Age in the Fertile Crescent and later, beginning about 5,000 years ago, when human beings in the region began to write, offer a much greater degree of certainty and detail. Nevertheless, the written record at this time is neither complete nor unambiguous, so it is important to supplement it with archaeology and mythology. Mesopotamia. Sumer. The earliest cities arose about 3,200 BC in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, known as Mesopotamia, which means land between the rivers. In the southern region of Mesopotamia, called Sumer after the culture of its inhabitants, these cities became small states that governed areas about 10 miles in diameter and fought among themselves over the control of water. As the stronger Sumerian city-states conquered the weaker, larger political units were established, and these fought one another on a larger scale in an effort to unify the entire valley under their own control. Unification of the entire river valley was desirable because it would lead to more efficient use of the river systems for agriculture, and conflict arose because one city-state was unwilling to surrender its sovereignty to another to achieve this goal. Akkadians. A semi-nomadic people known as the Akkadians, who spoke a Semitic language, began to leave the deserts west of Mesopotamia and settle in the central region of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley during the 4th millennium BC. These Akkadians, led by their king Sargon, circa 2371 to 2316 BC, conquered the various Sumerian city-states and established an empire that unified Mesopotamia and reached beyond its boundaries, into the Iranian plateau in the east and as far west as Lebanon. Sargon's dynasty ruled Akkad and Sumer for about 200 years. Third Dynasty of Ur. Many Sumerians resented the Akkadian attempt to dominate them, and around 2100 BC, the Sumerian city of Ur attained control of Mesopotamia after the Akkadian Empire had been weakened by foreign invasions. This third dynasty of Ur ruled for about 100 years. Dissension led to a period of chaos during which no single dynasty controlled the entire region, circa 2000 to 1900 BC. By the time unity was restored, the Sumerians had lost their identity as a distinct group. Amorites, Old Babylonian dynasty. Mesopotamia was once again unified, this time by a people known as the Amorites. Their empire is known as the Old Babylonian, since they established their capital at Babylon on the Euphrates. They ruled for about 300 years, from around 1900 to 1600 BC. Their greatest king was Hammurabi, circa 1792 to 1750 BC, who is famous for his law code. Hammurabi's code was a collection of old and new legal judgments, resulting in the most comprehensive body of law from ancient Mesopotamia. The code prescribed harsh punishments for violators, according to the principle an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Like other Mesopotamian kings, Hammurabi claimed to be a representative of the gods, from whom he derived his authority. His code was intended to provide stability in a hierarchical society, with the king at the top of the social pyramid, the warrior aristocracy and priesthood on a level below him, freemen such as peasants and merchants, below the nobles and priests, and slaves at the bottom. Slaves might be foreigners conquered in war or Mesopotamian citizens who could not pay off their debts. Slavery was often temporary, for freemen who fell into debt became slaves until they paid off what they owed by means of physical labor. They were also allowed to do business and own property, and they might thereby buy their freedom. Hammurabi's code dealt principally with legislation regarding the family, regulating divorce and inheritance, the ownership of land, and commercial transactions. Hittites, Kassites, and Hurrians. The Old Babylonian Empire disintegrated around 1600 BC after it was attacked by two different groups of invaders, Hittites from Anatolia, Asia Minor, in the north and Kassites from the east, the region that is now Iran. Although the Hittites merely plundered the Old Babylonian Empire and returned home with the spoils of war, the Kassites established themselves as rulers for 300 years. Another group, the Hurrians, established the kingdom of Mitanni in the upper Tigris-Euphrates Valley around 1500 BC. It lasted until about 1400 BC, when the Hittites conquered the Hurrians. Mesopotamian culture. Cuneiform. As noted earlier, writing was at first primarily used to keep track of goods. As early as 8000 BC, tokens appear to have been used for this purpose. By about 3000 BC, the Sumerians replaced these tokens with marks impressed on clay tablets, utilizing a stylus that created wedge-shaped strokes. Such script is called cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, or wedge. The marks were initially pictographs, or symbols representing physical objects. These marks were later joined by ideograms, or symbols representing ideas. The symbols became even more abstract when the marks began to be used phonetically, signifying not an object or idea, but the sounds of spoken words. Mesopotamian cuneiform was a combination of pictographs and ideograms that signified entire words and phonetic symbols that represented the sounds of distinct syllables. Since the phonetic symbols represented entire syllables rather than individual sounds, Mesopotamian cuneiform did not employ an alphabet, whose components are letters, but a syllabary, whose components are syllables. Because the Mesopotamian cuneiform system required the memorization of over 600 symbols, it was difficult to learn, and its use was largely restricted to a class of professional scribes. The cuneiform used by the Sumerians was later adopted by the Akkadians and eventually adapted for use with many other Near Eastern languages as well. Although cuneiform was used initially for economic and administrative documents, it later also served the needs of religion and literature. Mathematics. Cuneiform tablets indicate that numbers were calculated on a sexagesimal or base 60 system, which is still in use today for keeping time. Hence, there are 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. The year was divided into 12 months, but these months were based on the cycle of the moon's phases of approximately 30 days. Consequently, A 13th month was inserted every few years to keep the calendar in step with the seasons. Engineering. Mesopotamian civilization could not have arisen if it had not first acquired the ability to construct canals for irrigation and flood control. Yet perhaps the most important of Mesopotamian achievements in engineering was the wheel, which was invented between 3500 and 3000 BC. The mathematical sophistication of the Mesopotamian peoples was coupled with their practical skill in engineering to create distinctive religious structures, known as ziggurats, which were multi-terraced, pyramid-like constructions crowned with a temple at the summit. Religion. The Sumerians and their successors worshipped an anthropomorphic pantheon of gods who were thought to behave like human beings. Since these capricious and powerful beings wielded the forces of nature, they had to be appeased, lest their wrath destroy society. This danger was sensed especially in the violent floods that washed through the Tigris-Euphrates Valley at irregular intervals. Consequently, the priesthood flourished, busy not only in treating the gods for mercy, but also attempting to foretell future events by practicing divination, studying the stars and the entrails of sacrificial animals for correlations in their patterns and natural events. Mesopotamian religion was mainly concerned with life in this world, for its view of the afterlife was uncertain and gloomy. The dead were thought to wander aimlessly in a shadowy netherworld. Literature. The Sumerian epic poem known as Gilgamesh, inscribed about 2000 BC on 12 cuneiform tablets, describes the ill-fated quest of the hero Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, in search of immortality. The Mesopotamian story of creation, presented in the epic poem Enuma Elish, and an account of a great flood, described in Gilgamesh, influenced the religions of the ancient Near East, including Judaism, as suggested by parallels between the biblical and pre-biblical accounts. Egypt and the Nile. Although civilization in Mesopotamia seems to have somewhat predated civilization in the Nile Valley, the Egyptians unified the Nile Valley before Sargon of Akkad imposed unity on Mesopotamia. Asia Minor. Egyptian dynasties. A series of 31 royal families, or dynasties, ruled Egypt over the course of its. Although civilization in Mesopotamia seems to have somewhat predated civilization in the Nile Valley, the Egyptian Sargon of Akkad imposed unity on Mesopotamia. Egyptian unity was also more stable and enduring, thanks in large measure to the geography of the region. The long, narrow valley of the Nile was bounded by vast deserts which armies could not cross. Thus, the Egyptians did not suffer numerous invasions from many directions, as the Mesopotamians did. There were essentially only two strategic directions that the Egyptians needed to defend. To the north, they had to guard the delta where the Nile joins the Mediterranean Sea, and to the south, the upper reaches of the river. Egyptian dynasties. A series of 31 royal families, or dynasties, ruled Egypt over the course of its first 3,000 years of history, which is divided into the following periods: Archaic or Early Dynastic, Old Kingdom, First Intermediate Period, Middle Kingdom, Second Intermediate Period, and New Kingdom. The dynasties came to an end with Cleopatra in 30 BC, when the Romans incorporated Egypt into their empire. Since historians often disagree on the precise dates for dividing these periods, the dates given below are only approximations. Likewise, the regnal dates of the kings are also subject to debate. Throughout this review, dates following the names of leaders generally indicate the years of their reign. The kings of Egypt had the title pharaoh, which in ancient Egyptian meant great house, indicating the royal palace in which the ruler lived. Archaic or Early Dynastic Period. The first two dynasties governed Egypt from about 3100 to 2700 BC, during which time they unified the Nile Valley. Unlike the Tigris and Euphrates, whose flooding was both unpredictable and violent, the Nile River flooded regularly and gently. Thus, the pharaoh's priests were able to predict when flooding would take place, and this made it possible to tell the peasants the best time for planting. Under centralized government, the economy was carefully planned and led to a very efficient practice of agriculture. This prosperity strengthened the political and religious aura of the pharaoh. Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom lasted from about 2700 to 2200 BC during the 3rd to the 6th dynasties, when the power of the pharaohs was supreme. At this time, the pharaohs were regarded not merely as representatives of the gods, as in Mesopotamia, but as gods themselves. Thus, ancient Egyptian government was a theocracy. The entire country was considered to be Pharaoh's personal possession and its economy completely under his control. The greatest pyramids were constructed at this time, particularly during the 4th dynasty at Giza, and were enormous tombs for the pharaohs and their families. Although at later times the pharaoh's claim to divinity was still recognized, later pharaohs did not enjoy as much power in relation to the Egyptian nobles and priests as they did during the Old Kingdom. Similarly, during the Old Kingdom, only pharaohs and their household were thought to be immortal. The belief in an afterlife led to the practice of embalming mummification, for it was believed that the departed soul would need its body in its next life. First Intermediate Period. From about 2200 to 2050 BC, the pharaohs failed to assert themselves, with the result that the nobles, or nomarchs, the administrators of local districts or nomes, effectively controlled the government. This decentralization of power led to civil wars. As the nomarchs vied with one another for supremacy, there was a lack of coordination in agriculture, resulting in widespread famine. Middle Kingdom. From about 2050 to 1700 BC, centralized government was restored and maintained in Egypt under the 11th and 12th dynasties. This period of stability ended when foreigners, known as the Hyksos, invaded the Nile Delta and overran the Egyptian army in their horse-drawn chariots. The identity of the Hyksos is not certain. Second Intermediate Period. The Hyksos dominated Egypt from about 1700 to 1550 BC. Although they were strong in the Nile Delta, they were unable to assert their control over the upper reaches of the valley. The Hyksos were finally expelled by a nobleman named Ahmose, who founded the 18th dynasty and inaugurated the era of the New Kingdom. New Kingdom. From about 1550 to 1100 BC, under the 18th to 20th dynasties, the Egyptian pharaohs reasserted their power and expanded beyond the traditional frontiers, reaching southward up the Nile River into Africa and sending armies northeastward across the Sinai Peninsula into the Levant and Anatolia. The Egyptians hoped to prevent future invasions of the Nile Valley by dominating the eastern shoreline of the Mediterranean, Palestine, and Syria, the direction from which the Hyksos had come. There the Egyptians came into conflict with the Hittites, who claimed the same territory. These two mighty empires fought a series of wars over the course of several centuries. Among their battles was one fought at Megiddo, 1457 BC, a place where so many battles were fought over the centuries that it became immortalized in the Christian Bible as the apocalyptic battlefield of Armageddon. Egypt's wars with the Hittites did not result in a clear victory. After a great battle at Kadesh in 1274 BC failed to resolve the outcome, the two belligerents negotiated a peace treaty. Egyptian culture. Religion. Like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians were polytheists, yet their gods were less anthropomorphic. Some combined human and animal features, such as Anubis, the god of the dead, who is depicted with a human body and the head of a jackal, or Ra, the sun god, depicted with a human body and the head of a hawk. Also in contrast to the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians regarded their pharaoh as a god. Some Mesopotamian rulers achieved this level of veneration, but generally they were considered merely representatives of the gods. The Egyptians also practiced syncretism, whereby over time two different gods were regarded as a single god under two different aspects. For example, Ammon, an important fertility god depicted as a ram, was later identified with Ra, the sun god, and was then sometimes called Ammon-Ra and regarded as the chief of the gods and the special patron of Egypt. Perhaps the most fundamental difference between Egyptian and Mesopotamian religion was in their views of the afterlife. While the Mesopotamians had a grim view of death, The Egyptians were optimistic that the soul could attain a happy immortality. They believed that embalming, or mummification, could provide the soul with a body for its existence after death. The Egyptian view of the afterlife changed over time. During the Old Kingdom,
Hold up, y'all. I just want to check. Um, how much more am I reading? How much more am I reading in this? Because this is quite a lot. Like we're still going. Man, this is all. That was all chapter two, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I have about 14 more. When we make it past here, that ends Egyptian. And before we get to the spread of civilization, we will pause there before we go into it.
kingdom, only the pharaoh and his family and nobles were mummified. Later on, however, immortality was extended to everyone. In addition to mummification and burial in a tomb, it was important also to furnish the deceased with texts of incantations that would protect the soul from demons on its journey to the Hall of Judgment. There the god Osiris would weigh the soul, and if it was found virtuous, based on the moral quality of its life on earth, it would be granted a blissful immortality, as described in the Book of the Dead, a collection of prayers and spells concerned with the afterlife. The Amarna period. Although most of the pharaohs of the New Kingdom were warrior kings preoccupied with foreign affairs, one important pharaoh of the 18th dynasty turned his attention away from the wars on the borders and into the inner world of the spirit, fostering a revolutionary religious phase known as the Amarna period, named after the modern city, Amarna, where historical evidence of the event was found in the 19th century CE. This remarkable leader, Amenhotep IV, adopted the name Akhenaten, circa 1375 to 1358 BC, in accordance with his religious vision, for he singled out Aten, the disk of the sun, distinct from Ra or Amun-Ra, as the only god he would worship. Akhenaten means devoted to Aten. He suppressed the worship of all the other gods and moved the capital from Thebes to a new city, Akhetaton, dedicated to the worship of Aten, near the site of modern-day Amarna. In focusing attention on the sun disk god, Akhenaten drew religious authority away from the priests who advocated the worship of an entire pantheon of gods, and especially the most influential and powerful cult led by the priests of Amun. Akhenaten thus not only changed the national god of Egypt, but also took an important step in the direction of monotheism. However, the Egyptian priests resisted the reform and, after Akhenaten's death, had it abolished. It was forgotten for millennia until ancient texts describing Akhenaten's ill-fated reform were discovered at Amarna. The spirit of the Amarna period is reflected in a dramatic change of artistic style, which altered the depiction of the human body from the traditional, stiffly formal types and gave it a more dynamic, relaxed, and naturalistic quality. However, with the suppression of the cult of Aten, Egyptian art returned to earlier forms. Architecture, hieroglyphics, and the calendar. The importance of religion and concern for the afterlife are clearly reflected in Egypt's monumental architecture. The pyramids, which were tombs befitting divine royalty, are only the most conspicuous of such monuments. The Egyptians later built magnificent subterranean tombs in cliff faces, such as the Valley of the Kings at Thebes, where the tomb of Tutankhamun, the famous King Tut, was discovered in 1922, or within temple complexes, such as the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri. Massive temples to honor the gods were constructed at Karnak and Luxor. These structures were adorned with sculptures, including sphinxes, paintings, and especially hieroglyphics, or sacred writings, which were a form of pictograph. Hieroglyphics were used not only in religious architecture, but also for official and archival purposes. The latter were not carved in stone but written on papyrus, which was formed from reeds growing along the Nile, and from which the word paper is derived. Such texts reveal that the Egyptians used a 12-month solar calendar consisting of 30-month days, followed by 5 days added after the 12th month, to total a nearly accurate span of 365 days per year. In the 2nd century BC, the Egyptians invented the practice of leap years in order to correct the slight inaccuracy. Although scholars have traditionally thought hieroglyphics were inspired by Mesopotamian cuneiform, the chronology has recently been questioned, and it is now supposed that hieroglyphics may have actually predated cuneiform. The two writing systems could have developed independently. Whatever their precise relationship, both forms of writing were in use by 3000 BC.
All right. So as y'all can see, this is gonna be as y'all can see, this is gonna be some studying. This doesn't really seem easy at all, but that's what we're here for.
One, prehistory and early civilizations. Build a foundation in early human society by tracing the origins of agriculture, law, religion, and state building across the ancient world. Before the rise of empires and classical civilizations, human communities evolved slowly through innovation, migration, and the gradual organization of society. This module explores how prehistoric peoples adapted to their environments and developed technologies that transformed daily life, from stone tools to iron weapons. You'll examine early civilizations in Mesopotamia, including how centralized authority and written laws began to shape culture and behavior. As you move through these topics, you'll discover the ways religion, writing, and leadership structures helped form distinct identities in regions like Egypt, Israel, and Persia. By the end of this module, you'll understand how these early patterns created the cultural bedrock of Western civilization. Watch the following introductory message from your professor, who will provide some context for this module.
Don't want to know something crazy? So in the module, I have this one, the prehistory, all the different ages. Then we have the early empires of Mesopotamia and the hierarchical code. So I'm learning that I have to start with modern states first and then go to the reading so that I'm not over reading. But we're gonna go ahead and see what this does.
In this series of lectures, we're going to be looking at some of the origins of Western civilization. And Western civilization in the early era is broken down into several different time frames. And you'll see that many of the textbooks that you're using, as well as the online sources you're looking at, are going to be referring to some of these key areas by sort of a common vocabulary. One thing you'll see then is that in many of the texts you're looking at to support yourself in terms of moving towards the CLEP exam is that you're going to see areas like the prehistory era, where the textbooks will be talking about breaking down time into large chunks, largely based on the kind of technology that we've been able to look at and find historically. You'll see later on that we'll work through some of the early empires of the Mesopotamian area, which is what you're going to call the modern Middle East. For many of you, this is the areas of, say, Jordan and Syria and Iraq and Iran. You'll see then what we'll also in Western civilization do is take a look at one of the first comprehensive law codes. It's Hammurabi's law code. It is a vital one from the centuries about 1750 BCE, before the Common Era, and we'll be taking a look at it, especially as we see how it relates vitally in many ways to some of the concepts we have today. You'll also see that we'll work through several different understandings of early religious development and belief. We'll be looking at various societies and how they have promoted literacy, ideas of gender, childhood. We'll also be taking a look at things like simple archaeological technology, like looking at, say, architecture, looking at the creation of irrigation systems and things like that. We'll also work our way through an understanding of what we're going to have taken in many ways from ancient Egyptian society. We'll be taking a special look at the idea of the pharaoh, a godlike king who was represented on earth in human form, but that was always related to the gods of the sky. Also, we'll take a look at the influence of the Nile. The Nile as a river is going to be a foundation element in Egyptian society and culture, and will in many ways be one of the key elements in understanding the development of that key area of Western civilization. We'll also go back into the area that you're going to be knowing as Israel or Judah or Palestine, also parts of Lebanon, Egypt, and Jordan and Saudi Arabia. We'll be looking for some of the origins and ideas of the peoples of ancient Egypt, who eventually will be...
My bad. When we get to this part, the Hebrews, I'm so looking forward to that. Like, I'm really looking forward to that.
Called the Jews, but in this time period are referred to as the Hebrews. We'll be taking a look at many of their special elements that have carried through into Western society and culture as well. And we will close this section by a conversation and a review of some of the key elements of other civilizations from the area. The Phoenicians, who are from essentially modern Lebanon. We'll also take a look at the development of ideas that come out of the Assyrian Empire as well as the Persian Empire. And together what we'll do is the course of these 7 lectures will be going in and out of many key elements and ideas and concepts that we'll be building towards the modern day.
Like I said, definitely open up modern states first before you go into, reading and things like that. So that's pretty exciting to see. That's what we read for today. I won't be able to summarize, what we read, but all right. That just wraps up. All right. I just wrapped up today's CLEP study session. Here's a quick recap of what I learned. From the REA book, I went through chapter 2, ancient, what is it called? The ancient Near East. This was great, kind of learning how everything got started was a huge highlight, and I think very, very important. It helped clarify, a lot of the ages and how people moved around, how people, communicate with each other, how did economies grow, just essential things like that. Then on modern state, the video lesson was about an overview of prehistory and early civilization, and pretty much what we'll be getting into these chapters. So stay tuned for that as we continue learning through all of those. Overall, I feel like I'm making a steady progress. There's a lot of review, but each session is building my confidence. So if you're studying the CLEP exam, let me know in the comments what you're working on, and we can stay accountable together. Tune in next time as we dig into tomorrow's topic, which should be prehistory, stone, Neolithic, bronze, and iron age. You don't want to miss it. That wraps up today's episode of the Study Guide. Remember, we teach to learn, and I hope this has helped you understand Western Civilization 1 for the CLEP exam better. Keep studying, keep learning, and keep pushing towards your academic goal. Don't forget to follow me on all platforms at King Musa 428 and check out more episodes at kingmusa428.com. See y'all next time.